It's the Beatles from the beginning to the end. It's their solo careers. It's their humor. It's their incredible music. It's the British invasion. It's their American adversaries. It's an historical musical education. It's the Beatles and a whole lot more. A Beatles fan's paradise. It's Beatles-A-Rama. Tune in. You'll love it.
Hi, everybody. I'm James D. Jones of the Magical Mystery Tour, Beatle Years and Beyond for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV. And today, I have a guest that you are going to want to hear his story, hands down. Now, before we get to any questions, let me set the stage for our guest. So, how can I put it? Some people watched history happen, okay? And some people were somehow standing right in the middle of it. Our guest just didn't witness the rise of the most influential band in modern music. He lived it from a perspective almost no one else on earth can claim. From finding his way into the Ed Sullivan Theater on that February night in 1964 that was so electrifying, to the standing just feet away on the rooftop of Apple Corps headquarters in 1969 as the Beatles played their final live performance. Now listen, he wasn't just a fan. He was there. The son of Nat Weiss, trusted confidant of Brian Epstein, and someone who built a real relationship with John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, and many, many others throughout his career. He's a firsthand witness, a storyteller, a collector, and a guardian of probably one of the most important legacies in music history today. This is more than just an interview. This is a walk through moments that most of us can only dream about. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages and sizes, please welcome my guest, Shaun Vincent Weiss. How are you, Shaun?
I'm good, and you're making me blush here. And thank you for those comments. I appreciate it.
Well, I speak from the heart, man. And
thank you.
Let's talk about your experience. I don't know a lot of people who can say, I was at the Ed Sullivan Theater that night, and also say, I was on the rooftop of Apple Corps headquarters. What a great bookend that is, just for that small time of moments for Beatles. Now, you've got much more history than that, but just that alone is a perfect bookend. The invasion of the Beatles coming to the States, all the way to the final concert on the rooftop. That's amazing. Now, with that being said, Shaun, you've experienced both the beginning of Beatlemania in the States and also the end of live performances. What changed more, Shaun, the band or the world around them?
James, I would say it was the band. I went to see the Ed Sullivan show. It was I guess it was my destiny because I had no tickets. I had went to JFK to pick up my stepdad. Nat was my stepfather. And I walked into Beatlemania. That was February 7th. My dad was flying back on Pan Am, and I
Ah,
picked him up at the airport. At that time, my father wasn't really associated with the Beatles. He was associated with a man called Walter Hoffer.
ah,
And if all you Beatle fans go and look at your I Want to Hold Your Hand records, you'll see Walter's name as the producer. Walter and Sandra were friends, and they were the legal representation of the Beatles in America.
ah.
Um, Very few people knew Walter or Sandra, and it's striking that if you're a true Beatle fan, you get into their history. Walter's very prominent with Brian.
Ah.
So I walked into hysteria. I saw friends that I knew from because I grew up in Manhattan on 70 East 73rd Street, and
Yeah.
I walked into Beatlemania. I wasn't, I was a Beach Boys fan. I was
Okay.
a Four Seasons fan because my
Yeah.
grandmother lived across the street from Frankie Valli. Well, his real
Oh,
name was Castelluccio. So, he would sing with my uncle on the street corners and so that was my music. I was born in 47, so when the Beatles came around, I was, like a teenager, but stepping into that craziness because it was crazy that weekend, James.
oh yeah.
It's very hard to express what it was like going from the airport and then running down because I knew a lot of the kids that were there,
Yeah.
and that weekend, just going down to the plaza. I didn't live very far from the Plaza Hotel,
Oh,
and
okay.
we knew Murray Decay, but he wouldn't let me upstairs. So um, it was something that to this day I get goosebumps over because I think back about that time, and
Yeah.
it's like it happened last night. And I guess it's when people realize they did something that many years later people are mesmerized by because unfortunately as time went on and the progression of the Beatles and the
Mm-hmm.
perpetuation of the Beatles, the people that were around in 64 are my age,
Right.
79, we're
Yeah.
going. So it became a very interesting weekend for me. It was before I knew it, from that Friday to that Sunday night, I was a Beatles fan. And I was caught up. I remember my dad saying to me, "What are you doing with your hair?" Now I had short hair,
Yeah.
and I all of a sudden I would push it down, and he would go, "What are you doing?" And what
Oh wow.
what your listeners don't know is that my dad didn't really become a part of the Beatles until 65. And
Oh, okay.
so getting on the Ed Sullivan show was strictly me and these friends of mine
Wow.
who went down to the Ed Sullivan Theater, and we met these two old people. When I say old, they were younger than me. They were probably in their 60s,
Okay.
and they had four tickets. So the one of the girls I was with, I called her my sister. She
Yeah.
really wasn't, but she was the closest thing to having a
Yeah.
female in my life. And
Right.
she latched on to these two people, and she started crying and she did all the things to get to see if they had, because they told her they had four tickets. Well, anyway,
Oh.
they told us that they were waiting for friends, and
Oh.
that if their friends didn't come, she would give us those two tickets. Now,
Ooh.
she was older than me. She
Yeah.
was old enough to get into the theater. So the two people, the extra couple did show up, and which was I mean, I can see it now. If anybody ever saw "I Want to Hold Your Hand" with Eddie Deason,
Yes.
could really get into the fact of what it was like, because we knew the Beatles were at the Plaza Hotel.
Right.
We we were trying to get into the Ed Sullivan Show,
With no
so
tickets.
with no tickets.
Oh
We
my
were going to do anything. We were bribing people, and they all said no.
God.
And as that Sunday afternoon, there was
Yeah.
actually two shows, which when I think about it now, is that, when I talked about destiny, what I mean by that is that many years later, I moved to England and I
Hmm.
befriend Mel Evans
Oh, Mel. Yeah.
and Neil Aspinall.
Oh,
Turns out that Neil's son and I worked together for over 30 years. So the connection was like, you couldn't write a script like this. But
no.
anyway, to get back to the Ed Sullivan Show, is that the extra couple came. But
Right.
if you ever saw Sergeant York, or you ever saw a Marine with the
Hmm.
shaved, the hair real cut,
Yeah.
he goes to the other couple. "I'm not going to see them. What are all these kids here?" She handed the lady and them walked away, and they handed us 4 tickets.
Oh my.
So yeah, I don't know if many of your listeners has ever been to the Ed Sullivan Theater,
Right.
but there's front doors. So we get online. The girls are crying. There's me and 3 girls. So we get in and we hand the guy our tickets. And because we had no adult with us, even though
Yeah.
Joanne was 18, they
Right.
put us up to the third balcony, which I don't know if your listeners knew that the Ed Sullivan Theater had 3 balconies.
Right.
So we get in, we get pushed all the way to the right. If you were looking from the stage, it would be on the top row of the last balcony on the left hand side. You'll see a little boy standing next to a white pillar and a cop standing behind us. Yeah. So we sat there. And you know what, James?
What?
I lost, I got so immersed into seeing those 2 little cameras and Ed Sullivan coming out. "Okay, everybody, the Beatles are going to come out," and all this stuff. "Don't scream; they'll be out." They did their first songs, and then he talked to us, because remember, we were there. We
Yeah.
couldn't. They were showing the commercials on those little TVs. Who cared?
Right.
I I to this day I pinch myself when I think about it. Every time I would drive, because I retired and moved out to
Yeah.
Massachusetts. But every time I would drive past the Ed Sullivan Theater, I would think about that. But it wasn't just seeing the Beatles there. I saw
Hmm.
the Rolling Stones. I saw
Oh,
Herman
okay.
Hermits. I saw almost whenever any English group would show up at the Ed Sullivan Show, we were there.
Oh, wow.
And one of the people that would always show up with this, and her, was May Pang.
Oh,
This
yeah.
was
May
back in the
Pang.
60s.
Yeah.
So she was a sweet girl. She was a big Rascal and Beatles fan.
Yes.
And we would all congregate on Sunday night at the Ed Sullivan Theater. So,
Nice.
um, but it's it's hard to put into words, and I get teary eyed now,
Yeah.
because I know I was one of very few who were there. But I
Yeah.
also, over the years, I met Debbie, who was there, but she was down on the floor because she was with her father, and her
Oh, gotcha.
father obviously knew somebody to get tickets to sit on
Hmm.
the floor. I was up
Right.
in the boondocks. They But you know what? I was there, and
You were there.
it didn't matter where I was there.
What?
So, real quick, the end of this is that
Yeah.
they took our tickets
Oh,
from us. I went back the next morning after school,
yeah.
and I went and knocked on the door, and a girl, her name was Cherry.
Yeah.
she said, I don't have any tickets. And then she said, hold on. She came and she handed me a ticket.
Nice.
I reproduced those tickets, so when people would write to my father and ask for his autograph, people
Yeah.
knew him because
Right.
my dad wasn't really known unless you were,
Well, in the
uh,
legal area.
yeah, or you were at the Beatles fan club because that's what he did.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
he would sign them and we would send them out, and I would
Oh,
people would
nice.
sign them, and it says with compliments from Shaun Weiss, and but
Oh,
it's an experience that I'm glad I can share with your fan your
yeah.
listeners, because
Listeners. Yeah.
being there is special, and the Beatle fans that are around today didn't know that. It's
Mm.
you talked about being in the Ed Sullivan Show to being on the rooftop. The special part of that is that I got to enjoy the Beatles in America
Yeah.
and got to see them in England where they were much freer. And
Right.
I couldn't show you, but I have the itineraries in my basement. Everything
Ah.
I have is in my basement. But the Beatles were, it was all regimented. If you didn't know where they were, you had no inkling unless you knew they were at a hotel, but they weren't, you weren't getting up to them.
No.
Uh, but in England, they were free. So
Ah,
I got to experience them as people in England. And we can
nice.
talk about that if you like.
Yeah. Well, going back to the Ed Sullivan Show, um, I, I was good friends with George's sister, Louise Harrison.
Yeah, so was
She
I.
was
She was a sweet
she.
woman.
Oh yeah, she was like a grandma to my kids, always bringing little trinkets and chocolate to get them all sugared up. And my kids thought of her as a grandmother, right? And she would tell me, she goes, my brother George was sick as a dog during the Ed Sullivan Show,
Right,
fever, sore throat, the whole bit. And she goes, every woman that was around was so crazed about the Beatles that they actually had George's sister Lou help nurse him to get him well enough to get him on
right,
stage. And she always told me, she goes, everyone talks about how great the that moment on the Ed Sullivan Variety Show was. And she goes, but you know what makes it even better? I'm like, what's that, Lou? And she's like, I remember it in color.
yeah, so
And
do I.
yeah, so it's kind of like the whole world's seen it black and white, but
Right.
for anyone that was there, you got to see it live in color.
Never
And
thought of it
what
that
a
way,
special,
but yeah, you're
yeah,
right. It was in color.
yeah. So it was just a moment in time, and just to think, I mean, it sounds like a movie, doesn't it? You showed up with no tickets. You thought, well, maybe I have a chance of getting tickets, but then the other couple shows up, and then they're like, we don't want to go to this, and then you get the tickets anyway. Oh, it's just amazing. It's great.
James, it's funny because many years later, Eddie Deason and I became very close friends.
Okay.
We did an autograph signing with Pete Best. I don't know if people know
Oh
it. I
yeah.
represented Pete, and my wife is Pete's tour manager.
Oh, okay.
And we sat next to Eddie at Chiller Theater for a weekend. And the reason we sat next to him is because Pete loved I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Oh wow.
And I told Eddie that, maybe 10 years later.
Oh,
But
okay.
I Want to Hold Your Hand. And then I said to Eddie, and I was joking, I said, Eddie, you stole my life. And Robert Zemeckis put it on a TV screen, which wasn't true. But
No.
there, there's certain parts of that movie,
Yeah.
like we never got into the Plaza Hotel. We
Right.
tried, but
Right.
they
It was
weren't
tough.
security wasn't
No.
letting us in.
No.
Even when Mary Kay would come out and I knew him, and I would ask him, "Can you get me in?" And he said no.
Oh
But
man.
one night, Saturday night, We were on, and I think it's the 54th Street side. We're
Mm-hmm.
by the park, the
Yeah.
54th Street, and we were on the side street by the theater, the movie theater. And we had been walking back from going down to the Ed Sullivan Theater on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I don't know if your listeners know that there's a back entrance to the Plaza Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So we were walking and we heard English people. So the girls got excited and it turned out to be Mel Evans.
Oh, wow.
And, we asked him if he was part of the Beatles, and, they pushed us off. We were kids and they
Yeah.
weren't going to sit and talk to us.
Right.
But,
Right. They were busy.
yeah, they went up, and so we tried to sneak in the way they were walking, and we got to that door, and the guard was like, "Where are you going?" So it's funny because when I watch "I Want to Hold Your Hand," I think of that. I think of
Yeah.
when Eddie and them tried to get into the hotel room. The funny thing is that a friend of mine, my wife's friend, Linda Murphy, maybe some of your listeners knew her. They used to call her Beetle Linda.
Yeah.
She rented the hotel room that the Beatles stayed in, and she filmed it.
Oh.
And when Terry and I first got together, we
Yeah.
went to see 1964, the tribute at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And Terry and I and her daughter, we stayed at the Plaza Hotel, but that suite was just a little too expensive for me at the time. I was
I can imagine.
a
I can
young lawyer.
imagine. Yeah.
But, can I jump ahead? Because I don't
Sure.
know if your listeners did know that. This was all because of Sid Bernstein. Sid lived on up from us about 8th Street. I think it was 81st or 80th Street and by York Avenue.
Okay.
And when the Beatles were coming to Carnegie Hall, my dad knew Sid
Oh.
through Walter Hoffer and them, and
Mm-hmm.
Sid promised us that I could get he would get us into the Carnegie Hall show on February 12th, 1964. The Beatles had just come back from Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was friends with Albert Maisel and his brother. I knew them because they lived at the Dakota. That's where Albert
Okay.
lived. Unfortunately,
Okay.
he's passed.
Yeah.
So um, it's, remember, it's like I saw the Beatles on the 9th. They go to Washington, D.C., and now I find out they're going to be at Carnegie Hall. So it's the day that they're going to be on at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
And I run up to Sid's house. I'm banging on the door. Sid's wife comes and she said, "Don't worry about it. Sid will get you in. If he said he would get you in." So I go down to Carnegie Hall
Yeah.
and I'm standing at the stage, and I'm knocking on the door, and the stage hands are coming out and saying, "Would you stop that?" And I said, "I'm looking for Sid Bernstein." So Sid comes out and says, "I promise you, Shaun, I'll get you in." I'm standing there, and remember, it's February and it's freezing and it's New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
He comes out, and it's like he promised, because that line at that backstage door was a mile long. He
Oh
promised
my.
all these people he'd get them in.
Oh no.
So he goes and he says to me, because I was standing there since
Mm-hmm.
4 o'clock in the afternoon, freezing my tail off. He goes
Yeah.
to me, "Just come on in and follow me." So I think he's going to send us to the back of the auditorium, back of
Yeah.
Carnegie Hall.
Right.
What does he do? We go in through the back, and the back is where the Beatles were. And we go up these steps and come out onto the stage. And there's about maybe 50 of us, maybe more. I don't
Yeah.
remember because I didn't really care.
Yeah.
I sat, he sat me down the last chair in the second row. There was like four chairs in front of us, and then we were all in the back. I have
Wow.
many pictures of it.
Wow.
So he sits me down, and the Beatles come out. Now, your listeners probably don't understand. Music projects. It does. So
Right.
I was about two arm lengths away from Paul. I could have grabbed him if I wanted to. And I'm sitting there, and James, I couldn't open my mouth. I just sat there. And this man, after the show, comes up to me and goes to me. And at the time, I was a kid. So he goes, "Oh, can I have your address? I took photographs of you." I said,
Oh.
"You took photographs of me?" He said, "Yeah, you were sitting with the Beatles. You're on the stage." And I said to him, and he's asking me for my address and everything. And,
Yeah.
I ran to the phone booth and I called my father and I said, "Dad, there's a man who wants our address." And he said, "Why?" He said, "Because," I said, "Dad, he took pictures of us on the stage." He said, "Let me speak to him." And I handed the guy the phone because the phone was we used to have 50 phones on the corners.
Right.
Um, so he spoke to the gentleman, and many weeks later, I got 36 photographs
Oh.
of the Beatles at Carnegie Hall. I still have them, and they're over
Oh,
60 years old.
Shaun, that's awesome.
And I show them on my Facebook page a lot.
Yeah.
If people don't follow me on Facebook, and it's hard to because I have 5,000 friends and they don't let
Right.
anybody, but you can go in and the last 2 or 3 years, and you'll be the first to know this,
Mm-hmm.
and your listeners will be the first to hear this, is that I've been showing photographs and giving little stories, and maybe you've seen them.
I have.
The thing of it
Impressive.
but that's my book. I've been letting it out a little bit at a time to see if people are reacting to it
Yes.
before I go through the trouble of putting it out as a book.
Yeah.
Um, but so I tell little stories and show photographs.
What
Um,
great stories too. Shaun, you got to see the Beatles twice in 1 month?
Twice in 1 week.
In 1 week even. I know. What I mean, who does that? How
Well,
does
I
that
didn't think
happen?
I'd ever do that.
Well, you paid your dues staying out there freezing your butt off.
Yeah, well, I have to thank Sid Bernstein, may God rest his soul,
Wow,
and
Sid.
another man named Peter Bennett. I don't know if you knew Peter.
Mm-mm.
Peter worked with Alan Klein at APCO,
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah,
and
yeah.
unfortunately, Peter isn't with us anymore. But
Right. So many of them
uh,
aren't, that's for sure.
in 1965, and I don't know if your listeners knew this, that the
Hmm.
Rolling Stones actually came to Shea Stadium, and they were in the dugout. In 65, I did not sit in the dugout. I sat on the third base line,
Yeah.
and the tickets were like $5, and Sid gave me my tickets. But in
Nice.
1966, with the circle, I was in the dugout.
Ah.
And you don't know how much I wanted to run out on that field. But I didn't have to because where did the Beatles come out of? The dugout.
They did.
Right. And then in 65, I might have had a reverse. Maybe in 65, they came in the armor car
Right.
with the solid jackets with the
Yes,
stars
and the
on them. So
badges.
it was in
Yeah.
66 they came out. But by then, security and everybody knew um, what to do with the Beatles. But you
Yeah.
know what? You know what, James? When you
Mm.
think back and you here I am 79 and I used to go to Beatle Fest and I thank Mark Lapidus and Carol because they
Hmm.
perpetuated the Beatles for many years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Um, and when I think about the people that I knew, uh, Tony Bromwell,
Yeah.
The
Lost its soul.
yeah, you know, and they're not here anymore. And
Right.
and they would carry the mantle of the Beatles. It's important that the younger generation who like the Beatles or who even love the Beatles understand that they were four individuals who came together. In the beginning, Pete was there.
Right.
It's a great honor to me to be able to say that I represented Pete. It's
Yeah.
a great honor to say that I consider Pete my friend. The last time I saw Pete, and I might get teary eyed, is I went up to him and I go, Pete, I love you, and
Oh,
he answered me back. He did a short tour in March,
right.
and you know it's to know his history of the Beatles and him
Yeah.
know and for him to know my history
Mm-hmm.
and to know the best family and people like Rogue and
Yeah.
the marvelous family Rogue has. So
Right.
these people who perpetuated these four guys that I fell in love with as you know heroes
Yeah.
is they should be commended for carrying that torch. Mark and Carol for many many years brought many people together over four men,
Oh, yeah.
four men that I got to befriend,
Yeah.
four men that two of them stayed in my house. And that's a story for another day. But in
Yeah.
1968, John and Paul came to New York, and my
Right.
dad met him. My dad met him at the airport, JFK. And where did they stay? 181 East 73rd Street, and we went to a hotel because they couldn't stay at a hotel
Ah.
until the girls found out that they were there. And then I had more girlfriends than I knew what to do with. But you know,
Wow.
James, my dad used to say to me,
Mm-hmm.
we would sit down and we would actually listen to, as he got older, we would listen to, you know, Beatle broadcasts.
Yeah.
And he was, he took, as did anybody who was really in the inner circle of the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
people like Neil Espinal, they took those secrets to the grave.
Oh, they did.
Oh yeah, and you know when I would talk with my dad about Brian, he get very teary eyed and you get very emotional, so I would have to back off
Mm-hmm.
um, because I could see his pain.
Yeah.
Um, but you know I can ramble on forever, so why don't?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about the rooftop. Now, Shaun,
Okay.
when you stood on that rooftop in 1969, did it did it feel historic in the moment, or was it just like another day in their orbit?
Well, you know, if you'd be so kind and your listeners would be so kind, what happened was is that I lived in England. I
Mm-hmm.
moved to England in 19 oh, back and forth from 1966. Whenever Nat became a big part of this Beatle history,
Right.
I would go to England with them. And
Okay.
so with the first time that I was actually introduced to the Beatles was at EMI, which
Oh,
is Abbey Road.
yeah.
And if I don't know, your listeners probably didn't understand this, but when you got up to those steps in Abbey Road, it was like a magic wall, even though it was invisible. And I always felt honored because I got to get beyond that magic. I got to go
Yeah.
into into Abbey Road, EMI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Off to the right, when you walked in at this time,
Mm-hmm.
back in the '60s, there was like a little sitting room. I always thought it was like a phone booth that had no phone in it, and I would sit there, and I was with my dad, and he went with Mel, and I guess whatever he was doing, I wasn't able to come. So I
Okay.
sat there.
Yeah.
And then I heard footsteps coming down that hallway. And I got up and I saw it was Mel, my father, and the
Oh,
Beatles. And
nice.
I stood up, froze, couldn't open my mouth, couldn't say a word. And they, in harmony, said, ho, 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 like that to me. And after Mel introduced who I was, and my dad puts his arm around me, but I still couldn't say anything. I couldn't even answer them back when they said hello to me because I was stunned. There I am standing in EMI with the Beatles.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
it was uncanny. It was so it was unreal. It
Yeah.
you I get tongue tied.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So there you are. You're introduced to the Beatles. You're speechless. Your dad's got his arm around you. How did you finally come to your senses? What happened after that?
They left, and I went back to America.
Hmm.
back Back in the 60s, I did a TV show called Disco Teen. Anybody wants to go on YouTube,
Yeah.
they can look at it. It was an American Bandstand with a vampire. His name was John Zachary, who was a friend and a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And it was like American people would dance, and we do little skits.
Yeah.
And so, and when I first started doing that in 65, I did it up until I moved totally to England.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I met many people from the
Hmm.
Stones, thanks to Peter Bennett. I met the Young Rascals, the Lovin'
Okay.
Spoonful. These were
Yeah.
people that would come to the show, but they weren't what they became today. Remember, these were new.
Yeah.
Billy Cunningham from the Box Tops, who I'm still
Hmm.
friends with today, and
Oh,
when I first met him, it was at Disco Teen. The Doors came to Disco Teen, and
nice.
they came because of a guy named Danny Fields, who was at the time their manager.
Okay.
So I've always felt that, yes, my father was a very important part of me getting into that Beatle world.
Oh, yeah.
But before that, it was John Zachary and Disco Team, because all these unknown bands came through. Stevie Van
Right.
Zandt came through. A guy
Oh,
named Larry Russell, who was in Reason of Seasons, or who
yeah.
went on to playing with Billy Joel and
Yeah.
Liberty DeVito. So those first couple years after meeting the Beatles,
Hmm.
music became a big part of my life.
Oh,
But
yeah. How could it not?
because of who my stepdad was, my life was much different than the average fan of music.
Oh,
Once
yeah.
people associated me to my father, doors opened that, and
Yeah.
my success was strictly because of my dad. So I want to go back to 66. In
Yeah.
1966, Brian and my father, well, it's late 65.
Hmm.
My Brian and my father were forming a record label called Nempia Records,
Hmm.
and I don't you probably know nobody in the listeners ever heard of it, but it started out as a jazz label.
Okay.
But for whatever, when I look back in hindsight, I say, he blessed me. But they made me a founding member of this record label,
Oh.
and I remember my father discussing with me, because I would say to him, "What do you know about music?" My father was a divorce lawyer. That's what he did for a living.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And then when he got introduced to Brian, and Walter Hoffer was basically stepping away, that's
Uh huh.
when Nat was put in
Oh.
charge of the legal affairs and the fan club.
Okay, yeah. Makes
So
sense.
my dad felt, and I've spoken to Don Dannerman from the Circle and Pat from the Circle about it, is you
Mm-hmm.
see, my dad went out, he felt that he really couldn't put his heart and soul into something unless he was on the same level. Now, who could ever be on the management level of Brian Epstein? He had everybody under the sun, from Billy,
Right.
Cecilia, to Jerry and the Pacemakers.
Yeah.
So,
Early Moody Blues.
right. And so my father went out searching for bands, and he
Oh,
found a band in Atlantic City. And I'll never forget, when he came home that night, well, actually the next day, because
yeah.
I was sleeping. But when we talked about it, he said he found this really good band, and he called Brian, and he spoke to Brian about it. Now, the Circle always believed that my dad was the reason for their success.
Hmm.
But what I explained to them, it was the other way around. They were the opening door, so my father didn't feel that he was just running on Brian's coattails,
Gotcha.
that he actually brought something together. So you have to understand, this is 1966. Brian used to stay at the Waldorf Towers.
Right.
And my dad and I would go over there and visit him. I've met Brian, I want to say 5 times. And every
Hmm.
time it was like talking to an articulate person that could talk over you. But he had that English persona.
Right.
Um, so my father gets a phone call from Don Dannerman, and my father says, "Listen, could you come up to the house? I want you to meet somebody." So Don shows up. My father takes him downstairs and takes him to opens a limousine door, and there's Brian sitting in there. So Don gets into the limousine and they're talking, and Brian hands him a business card, says Brian Epstein on it.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing was is that eh, Don thought he was just giving him his business card. And Brian goes to him, "No, flip it over." And so Don flips it over, and it says The Circle. And Don goes, "What's that?" He said, "That's the new name of your band, The Circle." And John Lennon came up with it.
Nice.
And so Don today, when he tells that story, he'll finish it with, "Well, I didn't keep the business card."
Oh man.
so
Oh
so
man.
the Circle, I have these really great contact sheets
Mm-hmm.
from the 60s of the Beatles, and
Yeah.
one of them is with the Circle and the Beatles, not together, but
Right.
they opened for them.
Yeah.
And how I rekindled with them was that I saw on Facebook, and thank you Facebook, because it brings a lot of people together, but I saw on Facebook their page. So took I scanned in the contact sheets and I sent them to them. They
Oh,
reached me, and then I explained who I was, and then for years it was phone tag, talking on the phone.
yeah.
We didn't meet until November of 2025.
Oh wow.
But I mean, we video time. They would call me
Yeah.
on my birthday and wish me a happy
Oh,
birthday.
nice, nice.
And one of the members of the band now is Dean, and Dean was in Ohio Express. And I,
Oh,
believe it or not, in the late '60s, I liked the Fruit Gum Company. I liked the Ohio Express. I liked all those bands because their
yeah,
music was simple.
yeah.
So Dean, one day I find out who Dean is, and he tells me he's in Ohio Express, and I say to him, I have an autographed photograph of the Ohio Express, and Dean's in it, so I scan it and send it to him. And then as I was going through files, I found 126 photographs of them in concert. I haven't sent them. I sent them copies of it, but I haven't made
Yeah.
prints, and I said I would.
Mm,
But I've just
okay.
been very busy.
Oh yeah.
So um, to get back to '68, everybody, all Beatle fans knew that John and Paul came to New York to do Apple
Right.
Records.
Yep.
So in May of '68, I had the inside track and I went to the Americana Hotel where they were doing their press conference.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm a name dropper, I'll admit it, but you know how hard it was for me not to scream, "Hi, John Paul, you're at my house." But what happened was is that
uh,
it these three girls, one's girl's name, I'll never forget her name, was Kathy Dacus. They followed me and they realized I was staying at a hotel. So they got suspicious. So they went up to our house and who they get to they call our phone number and who picks up the phone? And it's John. And John, they go, "Is Paul there?" And John hands the phone to Paul and said, "Paul, it's for you." And Paul goes, "Who's this?" And they hung up. But the stories like that
yeah.
are are to me what made me even more impressed with the Beatles is that
Yeah.
they were open. They weren't allowed to be as personal with fans because they got ripped apart. They got their
Oh right.
clothes ripped.
Yeah.
So people should understand that when you met the Beatles in England and you knew they were at EMI, you could walk up to them. They talked to you. They
Hmm.
signed autographs. It got to a point that it had to be stopped.
Right.
Um, but before, Paul would lived around the corner. I lived on the same corner, same Cavendish Avenue as Paul did.
Yeah.
I lived at
Yeah.
the corner house,
Ah.
and Paul would walk to work. He'd walk Martha. Paul had a cat named Jesus, and I always used to pet it and put milk out for it. And one day I went up to Paul, and Paul's walking. I go, "Paul, I haven't seen Jesus for in a long time." And Paul goes to me, "Oh, he went out to preach to the world. It's a cat." But that was their sense of humor. To
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
day, Pete has the same kind of sense of humor, and 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 I think that's what fans loved about them, that they could look at themselves and make humor. And we sometimes didn't even understand what they were saying because their vocabulary was a lot different than
Oh
ours
right.
was, and there
Right.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
words we didn't understand.
That's too funny. Now it's amazing that you were at the right place at the right time in so many different places.
Right,
You're lucky if you could be there once, but you got to see them twice in 1 week in February in '64. You
right.
got to see them in '65 and '66. You got to know them. They stayed at your house. I mean, you had access that only people can dream about and movies can write about. So let me ask you this, Shaun. If you could freeze one single frame from either the Ed Sullivan show that night or the rooftop um, concert, what would it be and why?
Well, James, it wouldn't be either
Mm,
because my most precious moment that to this day, I've always held very close to my heart, and I don't share it very much,
right.
is that in back, everybody, all Beatle fans in the 60s got Christmas records
Right.
if you were a part of the fan club.
Right.
And one of those Christmas records was my dad was mentioned in it. It was with Tiny Tim. It was Tiny Tim, me, my father, George, and an engineer were at the Plaza Hotel. And Tiny Tim goes, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Weiss." Wish he would have mentioned
Ah.
me, but he didn't. But anyway, that moment stayed with me.
Oh,
And
wow.
then in 69, in July of 69, George was doing, God, I went brain dead now. George was doing Here Comes the Sun.
Oh, yeah.
And I was in the studio while he was doing that. There was a Harry Krishna person who would sit on the floor. I
Yeah.
would always have to sit to the top by the studio too.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget because all I would hear is "Here comes the sun," doo 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 doo, and it would go over. And if any musicians understand when you record, it's just like you keep doing bits.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and so I'll never forget this night that Mel says to me, "Come with me. I'm going to get George's food." Now George would eat at a Indian restaurant on Edgemere Road or Edgeware Road. I forget. It's
Yeah.
over 60 years. Um, and I got to go with Mel and pick up George's food.
Oh.
So as we're driving to by this Indian restaurant, I walk in. I would go, "I'm here to get Mr. Harrison's food." They would hand it to me, and I was coming back, and and Mel goes to me, "What do you think of that song?" I said, "That's terrible." I said, and you know what? I thought it was because I was only listening to bits and pieces.
Right. You didn't
It
hear it
wasn't
all.
coming together.
Right.
So that night, Mel had come out, and if you would have to be there, but EMI attracted many Beatle fans
Of course.
because they could come to the EMI studios. They couldn't get up into the studio, but they
Right.
could stand out there, and they knew the Beatles would drive up.
Yeah.
And I've shown many pictures that I had taken at that time, and it must have been 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock at night.
Mm.
And it's July, and it's not warm, but it's not cold either.
Right.
And
Right.
we're sitting on the steps of. If you ever saw the Abbey Road cover or the outtake from it, the Beatles are sitting on that top step. Well, we were sitting there, and
Ah.
George came out, and he, smoking a cigarette, which he always did, which was one of
Right.
the. I've never smoked, and that bothered me when you got them all together. They all smoked.
Hmm.
And we were just talking, and he goes to me. Mel goes to George. Shaun didn't think that song was very good, and George looked at me and he goes, "It's not good yet, but it will be."
Ooh.
And I looked at him. I
Nice.
said, "I didn't mean it," because now I'm put on the spot and I don't know how to respond to it because I don't want
Yeah.
to alienate George against me. But when I finally heard this song, I I was amazed of what it came out because it's one of
Wow.
the most beautiful songs
Yeah.
that George did.
And what a gracious answer that George said to you. Well, it's going to be good. It's
Yeah,
going to be good. I like that. That's good.
George was, out of all the Beatles, George to me was the most spiritualist.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody, any Beatle fan knew that. He
Hmm.
wasn't quiet. I don't know why anybody labeled him the quiet Beatle. Because
Right.
if you knew him, he definitely wasn't quiet. Um, there used to be these girls that would come to EMI, and George used to have a white Mercedes, and I've shown pictures of it.
Yeah.
And one day, George comes out. Now, in the 60s, there was a driveway that went down to where the studios were.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, Patty Boyd, Justin, who was Twiggy's boyfriend, and Eric Clapton came to Abbey Road.
Oh, okay.
And they were in a Ferrari. 3 people in this Ferrari. And they
Wow.
pulled down this driveway. I don't
Yeah.
even know if the driveway's there anymore, but it used to be in the 60s.
Right.
And George came out and got into the Ferrari. And all you heard as the car was going back is as it was scraping against the wall. But
Ooh.
to get back to these 3 girls, when I first
Yeah.
moved to England, I
Right.
lived in Maida Vale because I had just gotten there, and these 3 girls were, one's name was Margot, Jill, and Lucy. Lucy Rigga went on to work with George and under his movie company. Margot was in love with Paul, and she was a tremendous artist. And
Yeah.
Jill just loved the Beatles. So they found me an apartment on Warrington
Oh,
Crescent.
nice.
So I stayed there until the apartment was ready up in St. John's Wood. But Maida Vale is down from St. John's Wood.
Okay.
So being on Cavendish Avenue, it's like go to Paul's house, knock, can I have a cup of tea? I didn't drink it. And he didn't answer the door. But there's many stories of the girls there that your listeners would love to hear. And the most famous one is the one she came in through the bathroom window. Her name was Denise. And I'll never forget Mel coming to me because they broke into Paul's apartment. They went through the backyard and climbed up in through the bathroom window. And they stole a lot of Paul's stuff. But
Oh,
Paul was with Linda at the time
right.
and at 69, and they stole slide trays, the round trays.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mel knew that I knew who they were. And so I
Ooh.
went to this girl, and she was an English girl, and I said to her, you know, what you did was wrong. And those photographs you took are going to be used in their new album. So please give them back. Paul wants them.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually gave me the slide trays, and I gave
Oh,
them to
wow.
Mel, and he obviously gave them to Paul. So one day, Paul and I are walking. Because I would sit at my window and wait to see if he was walking to Abbey Road, so I could run out and be walking with him.
Yeah.
And we were talking, and I said, "Paul, can I take a picture?" And he goes, "Sure." And he stops maybe 100 yards from EMI, and I
Mm-hmm.
take this shot of him, and he has this overcoat on. It was a brownish coat, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the nicest pictures I ever took of Paul.
Mm.
And I was going to put out a book of my photographs, but because I was in a situation where um, a normal fan couldn't be,
Yeah.
I didn't, even though I took the photographs, the copyrights were, sketchy.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I had to get approval from Apple.
Oh.
And at that time it was Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Neil was in charge of Apple.
Yeah, right. Back in the day. Yeah.
So I made all these. When I first got to England, I used a 126 camera.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I got eventually would go back and forth to New York, my dad had given me a Pentax, and I started to
Oh,
take 35 millimeter pictures. But
nice.
I from getting to know them until the end of what the Beatles were all about,
Yeah.
I became closer to Paul.
Oh.
And the reason I think of that is because my father was very close with Linda.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha.
very close to the Eastmans. And Linda lived on off of Lexington Avenue.
Okay.
And so whenever Paul would come into town,
Mm-hmm.
Linda would um, be around. But also back in the 60s, Linda was, I guess she wanted to be a photographer. I
Mm-hmm.
actually have some of her photographs in the basement
Ah.
that she gave me.
Oh, nice.
And it says Linda C. It doesn't say Linda Eastman. But
Ah.
anyway, she had came to my father and talked to my father about being a photographer. So I don't know if your listeners never knew of a man called Brute Force.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
Stephen, if you will.
right, Stephen Freelander, Bruce, Brute, and your listeners probably don't know that Linda did photographs for a CBS album for Brute.
Oh, wow.
Right,
No.
and yeah, and when Linda started to get her foot down, and she was a pretty good photographer,
Mm-hmm.
she came to my dad, and he was contacted by Alan Klein about getting a photographer because the Rolling Stones, or not Alan Klein, Peter Bennett, sorry,
Oh, okay. Okay.
to the Rolling Stones were going on a boat around Manhattan,
Mm-hmm.
and Peter asked my dad for a photographer. My dad recommended Linda,
Oh,
and
nice.
everybody. It's a famous photograph of Brian Jones on the boat on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Oh,
So
nice.
Linda also had a very dear friend. His name was Danny Fields, and
Mm-hmm.
Danny. If your fans are old enough, there was a magazine called 16 Magazine.
Right.
And Danny became the manager of the Doors, and that's how they came to Disco Team. They were
Ah.
nobody. And then Light My Fire was played, and they stood around and talked with everybody.
Wow.
So um, it's funny because people. It's not funny. It's just an expression. But when you look back in hindsight, for me,
Yeah.
from 1964 to 2026, there's a lot of things that happened that I guess it was just the stars aligning.
Right
I
place,
wa-
right time.
right, yes, a lot of it had to do with Nat. A lot of it had to do with him. He opened many doors for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of it is that I think that was just a progression of my life.
Yeah.
I think that I believe in destiny, and so I
Right.
guess that was just a part of my destiny. But when you get back to the rooftop, because I know I ramble and I
No,
passed
no,
it,
you're
but
great.
um, the rooftop was again an accident. I wasn't. I had just gotten there,
Right.
and I was. I would, as soon as I got to England, the first place I would run to was EMI. I would never even go
Right.
to Savile Row very much because
Mm.
Neil was at Savile Row, Mel was at EMI, and I was
Okay.
closer to Mel, so I
Right.
would go through there.
Okay.
So I got an inkling from conversations and hearing because I would listen, I wouldn't talk very much.
Right.
Um, I heard that the Beatles were trying to perform and do something. And so I was told the next day to go to Savile Row. Now, I wasn't really familiar with it. I've
Right.
been there a couple of times, but I went there, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a studio in the basement of Savile Row. That's where the Beatles did, like John and Paul
Yeah.
did. Paul, John's song. I forget now. But anyway, there was a studio there, so I went down there and I started to see all these wires and stuff going up the steps.
Hmm.
And then I started to know something was up. So it must have been about 11 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I saw people bringing things up, and then I met Michael Hogg, Lindsay Hogg.
Yeah. The director.
Right. And he said Beatles were performing on the rooftop. So I went up there,
Mm-hmm.
freezing. I had a very thin jacket on. It was sunny, but it wasn't warm.
Right.
And I got up there, and if you look at the video, Billy Preston is playing piano,
Right.
and then Ringo is in that red
Right.
jacket, like a raincoat. And
Right.
I'm actually standing behind one of the speakers. In the anthology, I'm there for like a second or maybe a couple of seconds. And I have a hood on and I'm freezing, but I wasn't going to leave. And then the
No.
police came, and everybody knows the story of that. But
Right.
I shouldn't have been there.
Right.
My name wasn't on anything. I just
Wow.
happened to. I actually, I guess I snuck in. But you know what? You asked me before, James, and the
Yeah.
reality is that I didn't think of it as anything, and it wasn't till many years later that I was at a Beatle Fest in New Jersey because
Mm-hmm.
Billy Preston was there,
Oh yeah.
and Billy being a friend, even though I hadn't seen him in many years, I would go see him if he played somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we weren't going breaking bread. But I knew he
Right.
was at Beatle Fest, and we were talking. And I went and hugged him. He was behind a table, some girl comes up with a picture of the rooftop, taken from I guess the right to the left,
Okay.
and I'm standing there. And Billy's getting ready to sign it for her, and he looks at it and he goes, "That's him." And she looked at me and she said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And I said, I didn't think of it like, oh, it's the rooftop. Nobody, it became years later with the
Right.
release of Let It Be and everything. It became something, but I never thought of it as being anything special. To me, if I was with Ringo at his house,
Mm-hmm.
that was special. If I was with
Oh,
John at his house, that was. If I was walking with the Beatles, it was special. In
right.
'68, we stood in front of Linda's house up on Lexington Avenue and 81st Street, and that was special. To me, any second I was around one of the Beatles, it was special.
Right.
And I don't forget it. And people say, well, how could you remember that? I said, listen, if you met Paul McCartney today, you would remember the time and date you met him.
Yeah.
I don't remember the times, but I can
They're
pretty
burned
well
into
pick
your
the day.
memory.
Yeah, it's a part of my life,
Yeah.
and so I feel blessed, and maybe that's why I'm still alive. Is that I can share these, and I call them precious moments
Yeah.
with people that weren't there. I always on my Facebook page, I always say that these memories bring you back to a time that you might not have ever lived at, but you can share that because now you're visualizing it.
Yeah.
And so the words and the seeing the photographs. And James, it's funny because back in the 60s I had a lot of friends and I would
Mm-hmm.
send photographs to them
Yeah.
because I lived in England and they were Beatle fans.
Yeah.
And Bob Gruen, who's everybody knows is a great photographer,
We
and he
love
did a
Bob.
lot of John stuff.
Yeah.
You know, his response was that it was an honor that people thought that photograph meant something to them. So I've
Yeah.
never, that stuck in my head. So because I start to share photographs that people have never seen,
Right.
and so I see it all the time. I'll see copies of it on a Beatles site or something, and I'm
Yeah.
honored.
Oh,
And
wow.
and people will PM me or write. Um, when people ask for my photographs I had taken,
Yes.
I'm honored that they would want to have a copy of it.
Yeah.
So, but that's it with my photographs. So,
Well, and how nice that you were able to send photographs to your friends, back in the States who were a big Beatles fan and seeing pictures that probably weren't published just to see them in normal life. It kind of made them human, right?
yeah, well, the Beatles were, they were four individual men that came
Yeah.
together. And, I get this question a lot. Would the Beatles be the Beatles today if Pete Best was the drummer? And I have a patent response.
Oh, yeah.
It really didn't matter who was the drummer because the heart and soul of the Beatles were John and Paul. It was their, I guess, their genius,
Mm-hmm.
their writing abilities. George grew into that,
Right.
and but the Beatles were John and Paul,
Mm-hmm.
and Pete was just as good a drummer as say Ringo was,
Mm-hmm.
because I've spoken to George Martin many times about it. And George, when George went to Brian and spoke and said to Brian that Pete's drumming wasn't up to par, people have to understand that that was in the early '60s. None of those drummers were on a wavelength. These
Mm-hmm.
were just drummers. They
Right.
weren't Gene Krupa. So
Yeah.
so when they people should know that when the Beatles went in to do their first record and they went with Ringo, not Brian, George didn't like Ringo's drumming, and he brought Andy White in,
Mm.
and Andy White did the drumming.
Right.
So I have to defend Pete because he's a friend, but had Pete been in the Beatles and the Beatles had progressed as they did,
Yeah.
as technology grew,
Mm-hmm.
Pete's drumming would have grown with it, with
Right.
them. Ringo's drumming grew with them. Now Ringo's a great drummer.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't knock it.
Mm-mm.
The thing that I believe is Ringo was a better fit
Ah.
because Pete is a moody, magnificent man, but he is moody, and
Mm.
so you know and well, the reality is it doesn't really matter because
Right.
the end result is the Beatles to America is Ringo,
Right.
and Pete becomes that footnote. But when Pete shows up at a show, hundreds and hundreds, if not more, line up to get his autograph.
Yeah.
And when we did Beatle Fest, and we did it with
Mm-hmm.
Billy Preston,
Yeah.
Pete's line was hours to get his autograph. So, you know, I say, God bless Pete, God
Right.
bless Ringo, but America knows Ringo Starr.
Yeah.
And Ringo's loved by millions of people.
Mm. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it too. Well, Shaun, the mythology that people have made about the Beatles, but you knew them as human beings. So, with that being said, what's something about them that fans consistently get wrong?
Well, I think it's a perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When you know somebody, you look at them in a different light. when I idolized the Beatles. You
Hmm.
walk in my house and there's Beatles stuff like here. There's Beatle things
Ah,
around me.
yes.
Um, when you get to know somebody, you see them in a different light.
Yeah.
The thing that I always found very interesting to them is their wit. To me, I'm not a I can't play guitar, I can't sing a note. So I never looked at the Beatles on that level. You know, like
Okay.
there are people like um that can tell you note for note. I can't do any of that.
Right.
I
Okay.
listen to their music, I love it, but I look at it in a whole different light because I look at it from where
Yeah. Different perspective.
where I came from with them.
Hmm.
Where but when I would meet them individually, they all had their own personalities towards me. But
Hmm.
what really struck me is they remembered who you were.
Nice.
Paul, if he met you once, he would, I guess he would just, something about you would stand out. He'd remember who you were.
Wow.
Like I got an invitation to do his thing the other day on the 16th of April, but unfortunately it was in Los Angeles and I
Mm.
couldn't go.
Oh,
And, and it's amazing that 50 years later that I could get a birthday card that I don't even know if he remembers it's my birthday or maybe he has like one of those
yeah.
calendars and he
Right.
said, oh,
Right.
Sean's birthday, so let me send him something, a Christmas
Nice.
card. Those are things, you know, like I get Christmas cards from Pete. I get Christmas cards from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I I I I'm honored that they even care to do that.
Yeah.
I get Christmas cards from people I don't even know, and I try to write them back because
Yeah.
I you know they're taking their time and spending their money to
Yeah.
send me something, and every day, James, I go and wish every single person that pops up on my Facebook page. I wish them a happy birthday.
Oh, me
And
too. I do that too.
I do it because I want them to know that I care that they're my friends. I
I like
care
that.
that they take the time to click on a photograph or make a comment. And to me, I'm appreciative of it. And the only way I can give back, I can't let 5,000 people in my house.
Right.
So Facebook gave me the opportunity to
Yeah.
reach out to people I'll never meet and
Nice.
show them things they could never see. So I made a post the other day where I said, you know, thinking back at my age, and you think about the people that were a part of your life that are not here anymore, and
Right.
you ask yourself, well, why? Why am I still here? And in the Beatle world, I believe it's so that I could share precious moments that I had with
Yeah.
people that could never have it.
Yeah.
Yesterday is gone. That's history. I don't know what tomorrow holds. The only thing I can do is share what I saw and what I did. And to me, that's that's giving my life of a lot of it was private. People
Hmm.
think I'm open because right now people listen to me. Um, do you know Charles Rosenet?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Charles,
Charles
great
is a
guy.
very good friend of mine, and
Oh, good. Yeah.
he put out and this is a plug for him. He put out
Hmm.
a book of the top 10 listed Beatle fans.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my father wasn't here. My father died in 2013, but
Right.
he honored me and let me talk about
Oh,
my my side of the Beatles.
nice.
And in November, the Circle and Billy J. Kramer, we did a show here in Mass, and that's where I
Hmm.
first got to meet them together.
Yeah.
And Charles was there, and to see how people, because it's not just the book is filled with people who had interactions with the Beatles.
Yeah.
So it was from Billy J. Kramer to Don Bannerman to anybody who had an interaction, a lot like what Louise did with that Book of Love,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
where she got like Denny Lane and
Mm-hmm.
Young and Roy Young and them to write a little chapter about. Well, that's what Charles did, is just update it.
Yeah.
And so that book tells a lot of people's interpretation of their actions with the Beatles.
Yeah.
So any of your listeners want it, they can go and get it. And I think the more younger people realize that there are still some people around who had an interaction with the Beatles,
Yeah.
that they could get a book like that and read the stories from some of these people that had a big part of the Beatles' lives.
Oh, yeah. Well, Shaun, you talked about being friends with Paul, being friends with George, John, and Ringo. Let me ask you this. Which of the four surprised you the most when you got to know them, beyond the public image that they have?
I would say George.
Really?
You know, it, because of my closeness with Mel,
Mm-hmm.
and in '69, I really
Yeah.
got very close with George
Mm-hmm.
because I was going and buying his food and,
Yeah.
and then
You were
bringing it
there.
to him. I was talking to him. And I realized that George's spirituality was refreshing.
Mm.
He understood I knew nothing about music. So he would talk to me not as a musician, as a
Mm-hmm.
person. Paul did the same thing. Uh, Ringo, Richie, whatever you want to call him,
Right.
he was more confined. And he's gotten more and more confined unless you're really close to him.
Yeah.
Um, John lived in the building in front of me
Mm.
in New York. And I would see John and Yoko all the time. And John was, when I first started uh, following the Beatles, John was my favorite.
Ah.
John was it. And then as the '60s went by, and then the '70s, and where my apartment was overlooking. I lived on Central Park, and
Right.
the Dakota was the building in front of me. So I
Mm.
lived in the corner apartment, so I could see them,
Ah.
and I would see John and Yoko, and then Shaun came around, and to this day, it took me many, many years just to be able to walk in front of the Dakota, excuse me,
Yeah.
because of the pain that 1980 brought me.
Oh, yeah.
I was there. It was devastating. I'll never forget. I was laying in my bed watching a football game,
Right.
and I started hearing sirens because it's in my neighborhood. And
Right.
I looked out the window, and you seen flashing police cars.
Oh,
And I
man.
went downstairs, and when I found out what happened, because I heard it, John Lennon was shot, I
Oh,
ran over. And then that following Sunday at the park, it was massive amounts of people. To this day, it's really hard for me when a John song comes on, because
yeah.
I really tear up,
Yeah.
because it hurts. I'm sure all John's fans feel the same way. It
Yeah.
just became very emotional for me
Mm.
because I I understood John. I understood what type of person John was. He could be a sarcastic person. He
Hmm.
could be mean. But he wasn't mean in a mean spirited way. But what people I would say being mean is maybe more being cold. There was a period of time where John wouldn't sign autographs,
Mm.
and then that changed. And um, I would talk to him because one of the. It's funny. I don't know. You might know who he is, but I don't know if your listeners know who Leon Wiles is.
Oh yeah, his lawyer.
Right.
Yeah.
So many years later, David Peel, who was a part of Apple Records,
Yeah.
me, my wife, and Leon Wiles, and my stepdaughter went to see Ears on a Beatle,
Hmm.
which was the FBI after John Lennon. And
Yeah.
so I'm with David Peel, and David was very close to John and Yoko. Actually, John recorded his album.
Right.
John and Yoko did, and we're sitting there, and then afterwards we were gonna go up and talk a little bit about, John, and say our
Hmm.
piece. But this guy raises his hand. Leon Wiles is on the stage now. And the guy raises his hand, and he goes, "Why in the world would John Lennon associate with David Peel, knowing the FBI was after him?" Because the story, that's what the Years of the Beatles was all
Yeah. Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And David's sitting there, sitting next to me, and it was funny because back in like 78 or 79, they were almost the exact words I had to ask John. He had Shaun, and they were walking through Central Park by the. John would go down to like where the water was
Yeah.
by the tennis courts, and everybody's seen that video.
Right.
But
Right.
I'll never forget because I knew David. I've known David for a very, very, very long time. I knew him from
Hmm.
the East Side, David Peel and the East Side Kids.
Hmm.
I was there when he first met John and Yoko in Washington Square because that's where
Mm.
David would sing.
Okay.
And I did many photographs of David for different books.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, I John was walking through where now is considered Strawberry Fields, and
Hmm.
I was coming out of it because I would cut home. I worked at the garden, and I
Yeah.
would sometimes cut through the park if it was a nice day.
Hmm.
And I remember talking with John, and I said to John, John, I don't understand it. You know David, I know David, but why in the world would you want to associate with people like David Peel, Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, all those people, AJ Weberman, and then I'm sure none of your, maybe very few of your listeners knew who AJ Weberman was. And he looked at me and said to me, "David is a treasure." And I said, "Yeah, but John, you were being investigated. Your phones were being tapped." And he goes, "They weren't going to get anything on. I had nothing to hide."
Right.
And John was very honest with you. If you went up to John and he didn't want to be bothered, he would go like this to you, like stay
Right.
away. He
Yeah.
was he was that type of person. So um, David, when Terry and we would go down and pick. David lived down in the lower village, and we'd
Hmm.
go pick him up, take him to dinner. Because I always felt sorry for him because David lived in the same apartment for ever since he got out of the. David was in the army, and I always felt that I always felt sorry for him, even though I shouldn't have. but I always
Hmm.
felt sorry for him because I felt that here was a man who talent. I don't know if very many people would have loved his music, and he really wasn't a great singer, but he would put, he worked with John and Yoko, and John
Yeah.
sang a song about him. So, but I always felt sorry for him because of where he lived, and maybe I shouldn't have, but I always felt he was a very lonely man. So my wife and I would go get him and pick him up, take him to dinner, and
Oh,
um, I, I, um, David and I, David and I went to see Ringo in New Jersey
okay.
with a friend of ours named Elliot, and we it was funny because Ringo knew who David was,
Oh,
and we were about 3 rows from the stage,
yeah.
and David is like standing up to let Ringo know that he's there, and like Ringo ignored him, and I from that point I always felt sorry for him. Um,
Hmm.
you meet somebody and they touch you in a certain way.
Right.
I always felt David was a lonely person when he
Mm.
wasn't with that group of the band.
Yeah.
But he would go up to Strawberry Fields and sing at for John's birthday or the
Right.
passing,
Yeah.
which I can't do. I can't go there to celebrate the death
No.
of John. I
No.
can't do that. And
Yeah.
people ask me, why don't you go? I tell them. And it's devastating for me to go to the Dakota. I
Yeah.
went up to see Yoko in 2008 up
Hmm.
in her apartment, and you have to wear this little patch they give you. And I could never understand how she could live there because I
Yeah.
lived in the next building, and
Yeah.
it was I couldn't walk there.
It was hard.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was hard. So James, my Terry had Terry in my life is we've been together a long time, but
Right.
um, she had never met Cynthia or May
Okay.
or Yoko. So one day, I think it was like 2001, we're sitting in Central Park
Hmm.
and we're sitting on the benches. There used to be a bench we had my father's plaque on, so we were sitting there.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about Yoko and John, and I'm explaining to Terry what it was like having John and Yoko come through this very spot. And so we're talking, and a Asian bus tour comes to Strawberry Fields.
Yeah.
And who comes walking up the path but Yoko? Now
Oh
she
my.
has on, like, you ever see Gilligan? She has on
Yeah.
one of those Gilligan hats.
Oh yeah. The bucket
But
hat. Yeah. Yeah.
right, but I know her. So I
Hmm.
see her and I go to Terry, Terry, there's Yoko. She didn't believe me. So I get up and I walk over to Yoko and I go, Yoko. She turns around and she goes, Shaun. And I hug her. And then Terry realizes it's Yoko. But the funny thing is that there's 50 Asian people around the mosaic, and nobody knows her but me. And we're standing there with her assistant and we're talking. So
Mm.
Terry comes up to her and I say, Yoko, this is my wife, Terry. Um, she's Pete Best's tour manager. And Yoko bends into her like she's known her for 50 years.
Hmm.
And she hugs her. She grabs her hand. She puts it to her mouth and she kisses Terry's hand. And we say goodbye because, there's all sorts of John Lennon fans there. And
Right.
Yoko
Right.
doesn't.
You don't want
So
to get mobbed.
Yoko leaves. So I get a phone call that from her office,
Mm-hmm.
because her office was in the Dakota,
Right.
bad one. And anyway, I get a phone call inviting us to go to an autograph signing of
Oh, nice.
Yoko's. Something called The Witch. I forget the CD.
Mm-hmm.
So we go down. It's at the garden, and it was the bookstore at the side of the garden. And
Yeah.
we go down, and now we're standing in line, and we're not the first ones in line. And
Right.
Yoko comes from a side door, and she sees Terry and I. She literally comes up to Terry, and she puts out her hand and pulls Terry close to her, and she whispers in her ear, "Tell Pete John talked about him all the time, and he loved him." And Terry started to cry because Terry is a John Lennon fan, a big
Yeah.
time John Lennon fan. And for Yoko to do that, granted, I knew her, but for
Yeah.
her to come and say that
Yeah.
was
Wow.
is the that's the type of person Yoko is, and you know, I I I hear people say things that are disparaging,
Yeah.
and I don't understand it because you shouldn't be unless you know that person and they've done something to you.
Right.
You shouldn't have any ill feelings.
No.
The same thing happened to Paul when he married Linda. Those
Oh,
girls
yeah.
would scream and say bad things about Linda, and Linda was a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful person.
Oh, yeah.
So I always I respect Yoko.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited to her birthday party, and I brought David Peel with me,
Oh,
and Shaun was there, and he was playing, and then we were all talking afterwards, and she was in her 70s, James, and
right.
she had this screen behind her that was showing images of John, but the
Mm.
screen was more like slit, so she could put her hands and walk through it and
Oh,
start
okay.
rolling on the floor.
Mm.
It was for her birthday, so it was in February. And
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, I went up to her and I said, "Yoko, listen, I'm not as old as you, and I couldn't roll on that floor." And there was just her charisma. If you never met her,
Mm-hmm.
you really couldn't understand the charisma that she has, the power of when she speaks. I know
Mm-hmm.
people look at those videos that circulate around the YouTube and stuff, but if you met Yoko in person, the warmth that she portrays, and
Yeah.
when you can say anything you want about Yoko, but she's kept John's image and likeness
And legacy.
right, and she's done it in with care and love, and that's
Mm-hmm.
I respect her for that.
Yeah.
That's I respect what Donnie's doing now with George,
Yeah.
and I say to myself, well, what happens when McCall passes or
Oh,
Ringo
God.
passes? Because
Right.
Ringo used to have Hillary Gerard as
Mm-hmm.
his spokesperson for Apple. And so you when you think ahead, these men are in their 80s.
Right.
You know, going to see Paul, you don't. We hear him, but we all visualize him as a Beatle
Right. Yeah.
because people have to remember the man's 84 years old, going on
Right.
85, and his
Yeah.
voice isn't going to be what it was
No.
when he could
No. How
sing.
could it? Right.
Right. And so Ringo's the same thing. And when we see them, we see them as Beatles.
Right.
At least I do. I don't know if
Yeah,
everybody
no, I,
does.
I I agree with you. I think that's how a lot of people, because if you go say, I'm going to go see Ringo, you're also saying, I'm going to go see a Beatle.
Right.
I'm going to go see it. So I get what you're saying. Now, Shaun, I got to ask you, because when you dropped that bomb on me about Yoko pulling your wife's hand and telling her John loved Pete, he talked about him so much.
Yeah.
What was Pete Best's reaction when he heard that?
He got teary-eyed because Pete loved John. They
Yeah.
did a lot. Yeah, I'm going to get teary-eyed now too.
They grew up together. I mean, let's be honest. It was a hardworking little foursome that they had in Germany and in England, doing the clubs and the dance halls and the theaters and all that.
They were
So
mates. They were
yeah,
mates, and Freddie Seaman tells a story because Freddie was
yeah,
John's assistant,
right,
and when they were in Hamburg, Pete and John did a lot of things together. Pete and Paul did. They were arrested and kicked out of Germany together.
right, yeah,
People have to understand that they were. Pete was, whatever happened between Pete and the Beatles,
right,
even though they never mended fences, and
right,
and and I've tried
hmm,
as a friend to try to mend that fence.
right,
And I won't tell you what happened with a
hmm,
story with Paul be, because it was devastating to me.
oh
Of,
wow,
but anyway, you know, it's they just, as the Hamburg Beatles,
hmm,
as they were in their infancy,
yeah,
they did things that millions and millions of other people would do. James, and this isn't derogatory against anybody,
no, no,
but I would, when we would do autograph signings with Pete,
yeah,
and people would come up and say things that weren't very kind.
oh,
And then you find out that they're a drummer on a Beatle tribute band. And
oh,
I remember one specific person, he was
mm,
knocking Pete. And I said, buddy, I'm going to tell you something. You're talking out of jealousy because Pete played over 1,000 shows standing behind those asses.
hmm,
And you didn't.
right,
So your drumming now is for a tribute band.
yeah,
Pete was a Beatle. He'll
yeah,
always, and what your listeners don't know, Pete, everybody says there's two Beatles left. There's actually three Beatles.
yeah,
And and uh, I'm going to say something that they probably don't know.
mm,
Pete is the only one who has the legal right to use the Beatles. Paul will never use the Beatles, neither will Ringo. Pete, through his advertising, can use Pete Best of the Beatles.
oh wow,
And the DVDs we did, and the it says Pete Best of the Beatles. Um, was it, he passed away? He was in my Neil Innes
yes,
came
Neil,
up to me once and
the
said,
Ruddles,
Shaun, right? He said, Shaun, tell Pete I love Best of the Beatles because Pete
ah,
has a legal right to use that.
oh yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
don't use the drop down T because it's the Pete Best
Right,
band,
that's the trademark, right? Yeah, yeah.
formerly of the Beatles. So,
Yeah.
so when I hear people say that John and Paul are left, I mean, Ringo and Paul are left,
Mhm.
to me, yes, but there's still another Beatle. And what people don't know,
Mhm.
Pete got married to Kathy in 1962.
Oh.
You know who Pete's married to?
Hmm.
Kathy. You know where Pete lives? In Liverpool.
Yep.
Pete never abandoned his roots.
No.
nor did he abandon the fans that at one time it was we want Pete, we want Pete.
Hmm.
And so I know, I maybe people don't think that I should be talking about Pete, but I'm proud of Pete.
Yeah.
I'm proud of what
Part
he
of the
went
history.
through. Right?
He's part
It's
of the
not,
history.
James, it's not even history. It's that how many people today would ever be able to go through and live through what Pete did? He
No
left.
one that I know.
He got kicked out of the greatest band in the world.
Yeah. Right before they got big.
And he picked
I know.
himself up. He
Yeah.
went to work
Yeah.
as a unemployment officer in Liverpool
Hmm.
and came back to form a combo.
Yeah.
I have pictures I post on my Facebook page of Pete in Central Park.
Yeah.
You can go on that, Shaun Weiss and Facebook and look at them.
Yeah.
They're there. And people have to understand that was Pete's destiny to get kicked out.
Yeah.
But the fame that came from that, because everybody's curious of why Pete got kicked out of
Oh,
the Beatles.
it's the biggest question on the planet that I don't think anyone really knows the answer except for the ones involved. But look at what the Best family has done for the
Yes.
Beatles. I mean, Rogue, that museum is growing by leaps and bounds, and they're doing a fantastic job. Which brings me to a question for you, Shaun. You became not just a witness, but a protector of the Beatles' legacy. How do you balance being a fan with being also a steward of history?
James, it's not something that most of my memorabilia came through my dad. It's like
Wow.
letters. I have,
Hmm.
um, Hunter. I have a
Hmm.
lot of stuff from the Beatles from when they were on itineraries and stuff like that.
Right.
And I it's a shame that I don't know how to share it with the world except through Facebook.
Uh,
So there are certain things I can't share because they're kind
yeah.
of private.
Right.
Like I have a letter from Len from Capitol Records to John Lennon, and it was when John did Open Your Box.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the lawyer for Capitol Records, his name was Len, wrote John a letter. And somehow got to my father and was in his files. And
Uh huh.
in that letter it said, "This is Capitol Records," and I quote
Right.
him. He
Hmm.
said, "We own you, John Lennon. You better go in and change the words to that song." And then John wrote at the bottom, he says, "You're looking at that song as being sexual, but it's not a sexual song." And then John just like mumbled through the song. But Capitol Records had the gall to tell John Lennon that if he doesn't change the words, he'll never record again. It's things like that I keep,
Hmm.
that I read. I use my father's email
Hmm.
because of all the emails he sent to people and saved.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like reading them from once in a while.
Well, yeah.
That gives me, it gives me an insight into what, at that moment, what he was thinking.
Yeah.
And so, to answer your question, it's very hard
Hmm.
because you want to share, if you had $600 billion and you kept it to yourself, what good is it?
Yeah. It's
Unless
not.
you're willing to do something with it, it really yeah,
No
you got
meaning. It
six,
has no
right.
meaning.
So I have a basement full of memorabilia
Wow.
that I can't share
Mm.
because where do I put it? If you hang it on the wall, there's always an opportunity somebody drives past your house, sees it, and breaks in.
Right.
You know, that's happened to me before,
Oh boy.
where in New York City, somebody broke into my house and stole a lot of stuff.
Mm.
So I kept things that meant something to my dad. And
Mhm.
and James, this is you might want to when you edit this out.
Mhm.
There's a man. I had a bunch of stuff in the storage unit, and somebody broke into it
Mhm.
and took the formation of Beatles Limited. That was signed by Brian, my father, and Walter Hoffer.
Mhm.
It was stolen from my storage unit.
Oh boy.
It's now being sold on eBay for $7,000.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
I went to these people and
Mhm.
I said to them, that has no meaning to you. That should be in my family.
Right.
My father's signature is worth nothing. Brian's is worth what, $1,000.
Mhm.
Walter Hoffer, half of the people don't even know who he was.
Right. Right.
The,
Right.
the value part of that is that it's the formation of Beatles Limited when my dad took over as the
Yeah.
president and Brian is the secretary.
Mhm.
So they're selling it right now on eBay. And
That's a shame.
and you go to the police, you make your story,
Yeah.
and it goes on deaf ears. I went to the guy. Do you know what he did? He blocked me from and I offered him. I said to him, "Listen, I'll pay you $1,200 or $1,500, but I'm not paying you $7,000."
Right.
And then he got smart with me, and I
Oh boy.
called. He's from Arizona, and I called the police department, and he didn't steal it because he's in Arizona. I'm in
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
He acquired it.
He acquired it,
Yeah.
and so things like that should be in my family's estate
Right.
will only be in my family estate if I'm willing to pay the guy $7,000.
Oh man, that's awful.
So, you know, James, I keep things now that are much more related to my father and Hempia Records and
Mhm.
things like that. I have I have letters from Mel Evans,
Yeah.
and I've sent it to Mel's children. I sent
Oh
them
good.
copies of it.
Yeah.
Um, they were poems that Mel wrote, and it was should have been songs. And
Mhm.
so I sent it to them. I took every single photograph and sent it to Apple Records because you know, yeah, I was there, but those are still precious things.
Oh yeah.
Genesis Publication,
Mhm.
um, his son contacted me
Oh.
because I had pictures of I forget the founder's name and Sid when George Martin was doing book signing, and
Okay.
I got
Okay.
pictures of all three of them together, and I sent it to
Oh,
them because
nice.
that's their history. I was
Yeah.
just happened to be there, but it's
Yeah.
their
Right place,
history,
right time.
right?
Well, and that brings me up to my next question. Shaun, what responsibility comes with being someone like you who people trust to tell these stories with accuracy?
Well, you know, James, it's very hard to you know, I say this to people, and I guess they think I'm saying in jest, but I'm being truthful. Is
Mhm.
that stories start at point A. By
Mhm.
the time they get to point C, the reality is the story's changed. Excuse me. We all know the story of you get a fifth grader and you line them all up and you tell them you tell them three words, and by the time he gets to the end, it's a whole different story.
Right.
So the reality is that it's a perspective thing. It was from my perspective,
Right.
and so people will doubt it because they're not there. There's always the doubting Thomases in the
There
world,
is. Oh yeah.
and other people will listen to it and listen to it because they're a part of what you are. They
Right.
love the Beatles and they want to
Yeah.
hear everything. In the 60s, I would walk to almost every store in New York that sold Melody Maker and
Oh yeah.
16 magazines, and I
Yeah.
would buy them if the Beatles were on the cover.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm a rat pack. I keep a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I go back and read these stories, are they exaggerated? It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
When Tony Bromwell would go to Beatlefest and
Yes.
talk about his time with the Beatles,
Yeah.
does it like shift a little bit? Of course,
Oh yeah.
because it's the emotion. It's
Mm-hmm.
you have to take what the meat of it is,
Right.
and everybody's going to make it colorful to make it sound better.
Oh yeah.
But the reality is that it doesn't matter if, and I'm using Tony Bromwell as an example.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
use me because I'm me. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if I veer off a little bit because my memory at 79 isn't as
Mm-hmm.
good as it was when I was 15.
Right.
The emotion I hope people feel,
Yeah.
and that, yeah, I could be off by dates and times,
Yeah.
but the essence of what I'm saying is an emotional thing that I felt.
Right.
And I'm not keeping any flame. I'm a fan
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
I idolized the Beatles. That weekend in New York in 1964 was an experience which now becomes a history fact.
I know.
When I went to Carnegie Hall,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if people believe me or not. I have photographs. But what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying is, it was the emotion of me being there. When I was
Yeah.
on Shea Stadium, when I
Mm-hmm.
was sitting on that third base sideline and couldn't hear a word, all I heard was screaming.
Right.
But it was the emotion of being there. You
And that
see,
can't be denied.
right? And you can't portray it to people.
Right.
They don't feel the goosebumps I have.
Right.
They can listen to what I say and
Mm-hmm.
they can believe it or not. That's
Right.
the reality. That doesn't matter. The
Right.
fact of it is that they're hearing something from somebody that might have been there or might not have been there, but I was there,
Right.
and I'm portraying and perpetuating how I felt.
Yeah.
It's James. I appreciate this last couple hours, but I can tell you that
Hmm.
overall, had it not been for the Beatles,
Yeah.
I really think my life would have went a whole different way.
I
The
could only
Beatles,
imagine.
the Beatles took me from the Four Seasons, the Beach Boys, the Clovers, and these
Mm-hmm.
are some of the groups they probably never heard of. Then I
Right.
got into the British Invasion, and that music touched me.
Yeah.
And then I grew out of that and got into the 70s. But every decade, every generation of new music always brought me back to the Beatles,
Nice.
the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five.
Yes.
Singer. I can tell you stories about Dave Clark Five at the Warwick Hotel, where I met them through my dad,
Yeah.
befriended them, took all these photographs of them, got into their limousine with them, went to the Warwick Hotel,
Hmm.
and they were the Dave Clark Five. They were, they, And at one time, they rivaled the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And the Dave Clark Five, the Beatles. Then the Stones came about, and then the
Yeah.
Hermits, and
Yeah. The
and
Kinks and
and
all those
the
guys.
King, and
Yeah.
all those bands that today we turn on our radio, our TVs, and they're background for commercials.
Right.
So, so I wouldn't say I'm holding a flame I'm holding my flame,
Right.
and I want people to know the Beatles, hopefully the way I saw them,
Yeah.
and again, it's through my eyes and
Yeah.
the things that I saw and the things that I did. It's a wonder to me that at my age,
Yeah.
I'm even mentally able to let people
Yeah.
share to people that were never even born.
Right.
The Beatles were done by night. Then it became Wings, and it became
Right.
Ringo Starr, and John. The only thing he ever did was Elton John in Madison Square Garden.
Right.
So those times that people looked at John as a Beatle, he wasn't.
No.
When John went and played with Elton John, he was John Lennon. When he played with Gary from Elvin's Memory, it was John
Yeah.
Lennon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yoko,
Yeah.
people discouraged say, "Oh, Yoko." I have a song that Yoko did with Anthony, and if you really listen to the words, you'd cry.
Hmm.
It's so touching, and music touches our lives, James, and you know that.
I do.
You can hear a song at a certain time, and then that song plays 70 years later or 60 years later, and you're right back to that moment in time.
Like a time machine.
What you do, where you perpetuate the Beatles through your podcast,
Yes.
you're touching people that you never met, and you're opening them up to things that they could never find or hear.
Or have
So,
access to.
right. So you're a blessing. You're
Mm.
perpetuating music, not just the Beatles, whoever else. You
Right.
meet and you talk to people that have their own look at their part of the Beatle
Right.
world,
Yeah.
like May
Yeah.
Pang, who's
Like Maypang.
a who's a beautiful person.
Oh, absolutely. We love you,
So,
May.
yeah, and I'm I went to May's book signing
Mm-hmm.
for Photomatic.
Oh,
She
yeah.
invited my wife and I, and
Oh,
Cynthia was
nice.
there,
Yeah.
and Ringo's old girlfriend Nancy was there,
Nancy
and
Andrews. Yeah.
Joyce DeWitt was there, and
Yeah.
these are people I would have never met had it not been for the Beatles. And I was a big Three's Company fan. Meeting her was great.
I
Which
bet.
she wrote in my book. I did show the other day, but I shouldn't have. But you see, James, that's the beauty of music.
Yeah.
It links people together. For
Yeah.
instance, Billy Cunningham, who was in the Box Tops with Alex and them.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
One day, I'm just goofing around. I'm on Facebook, and I
Right.
see his name pop up. So I text him and I go, "Were you Billy from the Box Tops?" And he writes me back, and he says, "Yes." And I don't know if your listeners know that Billy's brother was really big with Elvis Presley.
Oh,
They're from that area,
okay.
and so here it is, 60 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and through the advent of the internet, I'm connecting with people that I lost contact with.
Wow.
Frank
It's
Jekyll from the 1910 Fruit Gum Company.
mm-hmm.
reconnected with him, knew him from the 60s.
Yeah.
Kenny Gorkin from the Critters, unfortunately, he's dead.
Right.
But Don Ciccone, who was in the Forces, started with the Critters
Mm-hmm.
and then became a part of the Four Seasons.
Right.
And then Don and I became friends, and now I'm friends with his daughter because
Oh,
unfortunately
wow.
Don passed away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Kenny owned the Bitter End or whatever that place was in the Village, and
Yeah.
Kenny was in the Critters.
Hmm.
So, the music industry of these people that had their, like Andy Warhol would say, their 15 minutes of
Yeah.
fame.
15 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. It touched my heart. So for them, for people to say it was 15 minutes of fame, to me, it's 60 years that they're
Mm-hmm.
inside of me.
Right.
Another one, Robert from Question Mark and Mysterian.
Oh,
Again,
yes.
another
Yes.
contact added to Clear Blue Sky because of the internet.
Wow.
And then he sends me his CD, and I listen to it, and I'm blown away.
Wow.
Another good friend of mine was in BJ and the Bear.
Oh, yeah.
Greg
Greg
Evigan.
Evans. Yeah.
Yeah. And people don't know it, but he's
Mm,
an amazing piano player. He just put
I
out,
didn't know that.
right. But, James, he just put out a CD
Yeah.
with the Philharmonic, the London Philharmonic. And it's him
Really?
on piano with them.
Huh.
When I speak to him, I'm going to have him contact you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the music that we loved,
Yeah.
they loved. So there's always a connection.
That connection. Yeah.
John Provost, who was in Lassie,
Yeah.
his wife Lori is a big Beatles fan.
Oh, wow.
She wrote a book about Shea Stadium. John was Jeff and our Timmy and Lassie,
Yeah.
but they're big Beatle fans.
Isn't that something?
And so the world today, these 60 years later, if you start to doing the 6 degrees of separation,
Yeah.
they all lead back to John, Paul, George, and Ringo and Pete.
Right. Well, my last question for you, because I know I've kept you pretty long here, but
I love this.
I feel it's important to get some questions out and get some insight from you. So my last question for you is, Shaun, I look at your life. I look at the sheer amount of luck and the right place and the right time and that driving spirit that you had. You've stood at the beginning, the end, and everything in between. And with that, if history gave you one more moment with all four Beatles together, what would you want to say or ask?
Wow, that's a deep question. You know, I would ask it, I would ask them if they were happy. That did their life give them what they wanted? Because in the end, when we look back in hindsight in life, we, you know, did we do what we were meant to be?
Yeah.
You know, when you look at people like George and you look
Hmm.
at John, who are no longer here with us,
Right.
I sometimes wonder if they would have walked away from fame knowing that where their lives would have headed at such short
Right.
time. Because if
Yeah.
you would, if as Beatle fans, we all loved the music.
Yeah.
James, I find that, especially with Paul,
Hmm.
that a lot more fans are Wings fans than they were Beatle fans.
Oh, wow.
because,
That's what they grew up with.
right. So, Paul is Paul McCartney from Wings, Denny Laine
Yeah.
from Wings.
Right.
But Paul, to me right now, is when he puts out this new album that's coming out,
Yes.
it's because he's starting to realize that his life was very, very special. I've met Paul's all Paul's wives.
Mhm.
I
Yes, you have.
Nancy is an amazing woman.
Hmm.
Came from a very good family.
Hmm.
Linda touched my heart. Because
Right.
I guess out of all of them, Linda I knew the best.
Right.
Heather, you know, there was something about her that Paul loved for a while.
Hmm.
So when you sum up your life, anybody, to include your listeners, me,
Yeah.
John, Paul, George, and Ringo,
Right.
were you happy?
Were you
You
happy?
see, you said a word before. I didn't ever felt I was lucky. I always felt I was blessed. I always felt that my life was geared to where it went.
Yeah.
And that's what I said before a
Your
couple hours
destiny.
ago. Yeah, and that had the Beatles not came around. You see, the Beatles to me changed me.
Yeah.
They opened my thought process. They gave me an outlook in life that wasn't typical cookie cutter.
Right.
You get married when you're 22, you go to school, you go to law school, whatever you do,
Right.
you know. So the Beatles gave me, as time went on, and I
Hmm.
started to understand their philosophy, and and I say this, I'm going to take you back to 19, just about John was doing How I Won the War.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was sent, my father sent something to Mel Evans, and John lived in Weybridge, Surrey. And
Right.
the, if they asked me to go and clean John's toilet, I would have done it. So they asked me to bring papers to him. And I got there and I knocked on the door. And to my surprise, Cynthia answered it.
Oh.
And I asked Cynthia, I said, Cynthia, I have something for John. And she sent me to the back where the pool was.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
John had this really amazing pool, it had this big eye in it.
Hmm.
But anyway, so I got there and John had striped pants on. He had a white shirt and this like necklace. And I'm sitting there. And it seemed like I was sitting there for hours because he's got his legs crossed and he's drawing on this he's doing something on a board, like a Christmas
Yes.
card or something.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm sitting there and I'm just sitting there staring at John Lennon. And I'm going, oh my God, what do they want to say? And they didn't want to say anything because they didn't know, first of all, I'm tongue tied.
Yeah.
Secondly, I didn't want to interrupt him. And then he finally looked up to me and he goes, hello, in his English thing. And I go, hi.
Right.
I said, I have some papers for you. And he said, oh, what is it? And I said, it's from my dad. And he goes, oh, your dad told me you're going back to America. And I looked at him. I said, my dad told you I was going back to America? I'm not going anywhere. And he goes, I said to him, we're talking. I said, I didn't plan on going back. I still have, like 40 days because at that time, your
Right.
visas went for 90 days and then you had to leave.
Right.
And so I would always come and go. Sometimes I would go to France or
Right.
go somewhere else and then I would come back.
Hmm.
But anyway, I looked at him and I finally got up the courage to say, John, where are you going to be tomorrow? And he goes, oh, I got to go back into the studio. And I said to him, well, that's Robbie. And he looked at me with this, I thought he was going to scream at me, but he didn't. He was very polite. And he looked at me and goes, Shaun, don't live my life. Live your own life. In Goldmine, they did an interview with me and they
Yeah.
quoted that statement from John.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. And I thought about it for 30 years. And I finally got courage one time to speak to John about it. And it wasn't 30 years, it might have been 20 years.
Right.
And I said to him, remember saying that to me? And he looked at me and goes, no. So, it's like, to me, that was the most profound thing in the world someone
Right.
could say to me. And then he doesn't even
And he didn't even
saying it
remember.
to me. But, that's what's really ironic about them is that when you're with them, they make you feel like you're on top of the world.
Right.
And
Well,
then when you leave them, it's like the air sucked out of you.
Yeah. Part of you's left behind.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
And if you
that,
think about it, Shaun, you are basically a living witness, a living example of how the Beatles totally changed and affected your entire life.
oh, they did. We could talk for hours on how they
Right.
changed
And
my
we
life.
have, right.
But all I can say is that February 7th, 1964,
Mhm.
around noontime, I stepped into a world that at that time no one could have ever imagined. It's like going through a time tunnel
Yeah.
and things are spinning around and you're walking through it and you get through it and your world is totally different. That Monday morning after going to the Ed Sullivan Show, when I went to school,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be in school anymore.
Right.
I didn't want to play guitar. It wasn't like I wanted to go out and be a musician or
Right.
play guitar and become a Beatle.
Right.
It wasn't that. It was that I saw something that I could relate to in a way I couldn't understand.
Oh.
It took me, after that concert at Carnegie Hall that
Mm-hmm.
night, I couldn't go to bed because all I
Yeah.
did was running that things I should have done. Like I'm sitting on a stage, and Paul McCartney is with his left-handed guitar, so his guitar is facing me,
Yeah.
and you think about things like that,
Yeah.
and the things you like. I should have said, "Hey, Paul, it's me," but I couldn't do things like that. I just sat there and sucked it in.
Yeah.
Being on the Ed Sullivan Show. When the Beatles weren't there, I focused on those stupid two TVs on each side of the screen, and I couldn't really see them because they were so small.
Right.
But I sucked in the atmosphere
Right.
and
You took it in.
and tried to enjoy it. You
Yeah.
could ask me what songs the Beatles sang. I couldn't tell you. I know one of them was like "She Loves You" and "I Want to Hold Your Hand,"
Right. Right.
but it was the surroundings that was holding holding me in from
Mm-hmm.
exploding because I was around girls who were standing up and screaming, and you
Oh
know what,
yeah.
I wanted to do that also, but I couldn't because there was a boy and it was 1964.
Right. Right.
So your emotions were like holding a fist like this,
Yeah.
and then as I progressed and started to listen to music and then got into other music and then got into disco teen and
Yeah.
started to meet different bands that were not famous yet.
Right.
And then all of a sudden 60 years later, and this is the last, And the Doors came to Disco Teen. I mentioned
Yeah,
it
yeah,
before through Danny Fields,
yeah.
and they signed "Light My Fire" to me.
Wow.
Now, my youngest son was a big Doors fan.
Oh, wow.
He was such a big Doors fan that he got a tattoo on his back when he was
Oh,
18. It didn't look like Jim Morrison, it looked more like Steven Tyler, but he got this tattoo.
yeah,
And I used to have all these 45s. And I
yeah,
had, to
yeah.
be honest with you, I had forgotten about
Oh, wow.
the Doors signing this. And my son picked it up and came running upstairs and said, Dad, who signed this? And I looked at it and I said, oh, the Doors did. He didn't believe me. Found a very expensive record in a basement that the record actually warped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But anyway, Raymond Zarek was doing a show in the Meadowlands.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to my son, well, you don't believe me, let's go. So I drove there and I reached out to his manager, and his manager said, well, wait over here. And Ray came over to me. I introduced Ray to my son, Shaun.
Yeah.
And Ray goes, your father was such a good dancer on Disco Teen. And he made me walk on water. And you know that feeling of, oh well, yeah, everything he said was
Dad's
great.
cool.
Yeah, I'm now a cool dad because my son told all his friends that I knew the Doors.
Oh,
But
man.
it's things like that. These people that don't they look at what they would consider their idols,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't realize that they're actually human beings.
They're
And this is the
people.
last thing I'll say is
Yeah.
that I've had a friend for 47 years, and
Okay.
I'll mention his name, and everybody knows him.
Yeah.
And he was on Full House, and he plays with the Beach Boys. It's John Stamos. And
Oh,
again, I'm a
yes.
name dropper. But John, my grandchildren were such a fan of Full House.
Yeah.
And I have a shrine. It's not a shrine. It's stuff that John's given me over the years, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
tickets to the TV show that he was on, I would go to
Mm-hmm.
see. And, we went to a Disney thing together. He gave me his lanyard.
Oh,
But
nice.
I have it all together. Like I have one of P, a tribute to them,
Oh, yeah.
and one
Yeah.
of John. So John has met everybody in my family, my daughters, my ex, my sons, everybody except
Right.
my one grandson.
Oh, wow.
But John met my grandson's mother too,
Oh,
back
okay.
many, many years ago. And so John was doing his book signing. So I called out to John and said, John, listen, I'm going to come to New York, and I'm going to bring my grandson. And he said, oh, yeah, fine. So we went to John's book signing on Avenue of America.
Right.
And Mike Love came. Now, Brady's been to Beach Boy concerts
Right.
because of John and Scotty Totten, who was the musical director.
Mm-hmm.
So we go there, and my grandson froze.
Deja vu.
And John goes, let's take a picture. And Brady's like, just like what his mother did, she froze. And Brady froze. So John takes a picture with Brady and his grandmother, my wife. And
Mm-hmm.
um, John says, please don't leave. And so we're sitting while he's signing all these
Yeah.
autographs and stuff. So Mike Love goes over to Brady and goes, I know you. because Brady had been, because Scotty, we went
Yeah.
to Hampton, the casino ballroom in Hampton Beach, and I took Brady, and Brady got to go back and meet Mike and Bruce and everything. So Mike walks over to him, and I assume that Mike recognized me, and then he probably put two and two together. But he came
Right.
up and he goes to Brady, I know, and it made Brady feel so good. And then John came over and hugged him, and John goes to Brady, what school are you going to? And he goes to Brady, oh, I love your hair, because Brady had really long hair like
Yeah.
John
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And Brady goes, I go to Bay Path. And John goes, let me have your phone. So John takes the phone and he goes, hey, Bay Path, I'm Brady's best friend. This is John Stamos. The school the next day, or the weekend, because this was on a weekend,
Right. Right.
played it over the loudspeaker.
Oh, that's too
And
funny.
Brady came home and said, he goes, Poppy, I have more girls coming after me than I know what to do.
Sounds
It's
like
funny.
a young Shaun Weiss almost, huh?
No, not at all. Brady's nothing like me, but he's
Well, when you were telling the story about when you were a teenager
yeah.
and you had all these girls because they knew your affiliation, good
Oh yeah.
stuff, man.
Well, that was a lot of that was probably my imagination. Probably one or two girls, but that's where you get a little exaggerated.
See, there you go.
And then my wife will watch this, so I have to be careful.
Be careful. That's right. Well, Shaun, I want to thank you for your precious time and your insights. What a blessed life you've lived and
Well, thank
continue
you.
to live. And you're an inspiration. I like that. And I look forward. You got a new friend in James D. Jones. I'm here for you,
Well,
buddy. If I can
I'm
help out,
honored.
sound off. Well, I'm
I'm
honored for
honored,
you.
James.
And
Thank
you
you
know
so
what?
much.
We are going to go out in style. We're going to go out classy, okay? I'm
Good.
going to do a nice little outro. Did I impress you with my intro?
You sure did. You made me blush.
Well, we're going to try again with my outro here, okay? All right, here we go. Folks, first of all, be sure to check out Shaun Weiss on Facebook. Check out his photos, check out his story, and be amazed. See what he felt through his perspective, his blessed life, his right time, right place. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful life. It's a blessed life. Now, folks, history isn't just written in books, okay? Sometimes it's carried in the memories of people, memories of the people who were there when the world changed. And today we just didn't hear stories, we stepped into moments. A theater in New York holding its breath. A London rooftop echoing into eternity. And a lifetime spent not just witnessing greatness, but rather preserving it. From an era of the Beatles to the evolution of their solo journeys and the ripple effects felt across generations of artists and fans alike. Shaun Vincent Weiss reminds us that the legacy of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and Pete Best isn't just about music. Folks, it's about moments. And it's about connection. It's about being there when something unforgettable happens and making sure that the world never forgets it. This has just been another journey into the heart of music history. Stay tuned, folks, because the story never ends. And with that, I bid you a good evening and a fond farewell, Shaun. Thank you once again for your time and your insights, buddy.
Bye, everybody. God bless.
If you're a true Beatles fan, you absolutely need to tune into the best Beatles internet station 24/8. It's a total game changer. Imagine this, your favorite Beatles tracks playing all day, every day, with all those hidden gems you forgot you loved. It's like a time machine that takes you back to the 60s, right in your living room. Whether you're feeling nostalgic or just need a soundtrack for your day, this station has you covered with non-stop tunes that make your heart sing. And here's the best part, you can listen anywhere while you work, relax, or even during your morning coffee. It's a vibe, you know. Just picture yourself grooving to Hey Jude or Let It Be while the world fades away. So, why wait? Dive into the magic of the Beatles and let the music take over your life. Click the link to start your journey today.
Are my questions okay?
James, listen, we talked 2.5 hours, and I didn't think I was going to talk 20 minutes. So the questions were definitely not boring, and
Wow.